I'm pumped to be here. In fact, I brought my mug that has this is the Bolts, which is the version of the 1980 Chargers that we have. So
Love,
bottoms up.
love it, love it. Oh man, Arthur Franz the fourth, the lead member of the Breakaway Football posse, who are they'll be coming to Canton in August. Can't wait to see you folks there. They're going to do demos and a mini tournament of their really exciting and unique game. I don't have my hands on it, but from what I've seen of the Facebook group, it's a very active community. And you really focus on team attributes. So you mentioned the 1980 Chargers. I mean, that's a team that's really unique, Air Coryell, right?
Yeah,
And you're also, I mean, you're a big fan of American football, so we're football guys. That's awesome.
absolutely.
You're even a football coach, as I understand it.
I was at one point, yeah, not anymore. But yeah, I coached for about 8 years in flag, 3 years in tackle, 1 year in professional tackle with a women's team, which was a lot of fun. I was actually able to help take them to the playoffs for the first time in their history. We got trounced, but still, we made the playoffs, so it was a good thing.
For sure, for sure. So your gaming history and your love of football, how did those two start, and how did they merge?
It started as early as like 6 or 7 years old. I can actually remember doing research in the library to learn how to throw a spiral better. And at one point, I had this macabre idea that learn how to throw with my left arm just in case my right arm were ever incapacitated. So like football's a part of who I am and really, central to who I want to be. And so we played a lot of football as kids. It's ironic though. I never played on an organized team. Pop Warner, high school, never. But I coached. I coached right out of high school. Got a job coaching at my former high school, even though I'd never put on pads. I coached there for 2 years, and it's just a testament to people recognizing, hey, this guy knows a lot about football. So it's just a passion. I think back to the Chargers team. If you remember, I think it was 1982. Was it the Epic in Miami when they had that lateral, the hook and ladder pass that struck through? I guess it was Tony Nathan who got it in the end zone. Maybe it was to Cephalo, I forget. But it was such a moment. I was actually out with my parents who were playing tennis, and I was watching it on TV. And that moment right there made my whole life go, this is the game for me. So like it was a very important moment in my life. I love professional football, and so the whole point around Breakaway was just to bring what I love about football, the X's and O's, the chess match of it, bring it to the table in kind of a modern approach.
I love it. I love it. And what you're saying there is exactly what, it touches on something that I always am very curious about. Everyone's got the same data set, right? And can find the same history, but to actually understand the game on the field and how to translate that in a meaningful way to the game board,
Mhm.
it seems like you have that unique perspective that's allowed you to maybe take a different approach.
I'm proud of what we've developed. And look, it's not just me. There's a whole army of people who've contributed to this, some of whom who are really active in other communities because this isn't the only game they love. Like that's the beautiful thing about board games, especially sports board games. We don't have to be, single issue voters. We don't only have to play one game. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited about in Canton is I've heard of these other games and I've kind of on the periphery, I'm aware of people like Keith and ST, and I just never met them. I'm really excited to go meet these folks and play their games and see what they love about football as much as I do. And I really want to kind of show off what we've accomplished because I'm very proud of it.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you're able to make it. And you mentioned your posse. You basically got a single platoon unit coming out here to Canton, and that's
Yeah.
really the one goal is getting the right people in the room. That's what I want, and it's going to be exciting to see. I mean, you real, you know, absolutely genius design minds together. It's going to be really powerful, and I think your take on the game, is so unique because it really touches on the look, you got these 76 Bucks, the 72 Dolphins.
Mhm.
Yes, the 85 Bears. We know what there are, but how do you really express all those unique characteristics in a game? And you're doing that, I think.
Yeah, I hope that I hope that players like the way that we've approached it. A lot of the games that are out there are based on statistics in a way that you can kind of see the math front and center. And breakaway football is also based on statistics, but not in a way that you can kind of see the math. That's built into the game day deck, the probabilities, and we did a lot of research to figure out how likely is it to complete a pass. How likely is it for this type of play to occur, this kind of penalty. And so we tuned the game day deck, which is a 54 card poker sized deck, to express those likelihoods regardless of card draw. It's very easy to kind of tune a deck that has a static number of cards to spit out a probability. So once we figured out how to do that for kind of a modern game, then we looked at, all right, well, if we're having teams from different eras play against each other, how do we tweak their strengths? Because 300 yards rushing in the 1960s is different from 300 yards rushing today, and like, what is that difference? So the beauty of the system is, you don't, as a player, you don't have to worry about all that. It's baked in. And all you have to do is really focus on the chess match of your opponent, the X's and O's of what play do I want to call, and how can I take advantage of what I think that guy's going to do, or bait him into something that I can then take advantage of, using this other tool. So that's really the core loop of the game, and it's bone simple to play. You put a card on the board, your opponent puts a card on the board, you flip them over, you flip a game day card, and you figure out what happens. Like, it's really simple, and you do that 60, 65 times, and the game's over. But the deliciousness is not only in sort of the agony of making that decision, because each decision is sort of like, oh, what if, but if, but then also the storytelling that comes out of the game day deck, because there's a lot of really good flavor text and circumstances that come out of these things. I'm just thrilled, and so I thank you so much for having us there. I really am excited to be there and show it to everybody.
Awesome, awesome. So are you optimized more for face-to-face play, or do you have a fairly strong solo mode?
So we do. I feel like it's very strong, but in the last week or so, we got some very powerful outside endorsement on the quality of our solo play. There's a podcast called Solosaurus, which is part of the Dice Tower Network. They asked for a review copy of the game, which was delightful because when it was two people, it was Michael and Martin Gonzalez, who's a really strong print and play expert. I had floated the idea to Martin. I'm like, hey, can you help me design the print and play of this? Because I just don't know how it spits out of the printer, and like, what's the right way to do this. So he actually worked with me several years ago, just out of the kindness of his heart. He didn't know me from anybody, but he's like, yes, let's make good print and play together. So the formatting of the print and play modules is based on, one of the godfathers of print and play. So I feel really good about that product. But then when it came to the solo mode, we wanted to make sure that we had something that felt like you were playing a human, but didn't require you to do taxes in order to get a result. That's one of the things. Like, we want to focus on our decision making. We want to just, what is my team doing, and how can I undermine what my opponent is doing? Well, the more layers of minutia that you kind of tack on, the harder it is to sort of forget that you're playing a piece of paper. So what we've done is, I think, really elegant. And Solosaurus agreed. They gave us what they call their stomp of approval, which is a thing. It's like an award that they give out. And some really big games, like I think Mansions of Madness and Viticulture, and like big time games that are in mass distribution, have gotten this award, and I was stunned and just honored, so thankful. But yeah, we're actually having all 42 franchises that we've built are going to be at Akron. We're bringing them all to Canton, Ohio, and we have printed all of their offensive and defensive solo AI sheets and laminated them. So anybody who comes can play solo against anybody they want. Anytime they want, over Saturday and Sunday. So we are prepared. That has already been done. But just as a real quick, I apologize. I feel like I'm not answering your question. The solo mode's good because it really does provide high quality decision making. It's not perfect, but they're all plausible. And so
Mm.
you really do feel like you're playing against an intelligent coach. And so you do have to consider what's likely to be called in this situation. And can I try to bait and switch? And it actually does feel like you're succeeding in that regard. So I'm excited to show people that.
That's awesome. That's tremendous. That's just one small part of what makes this game so standalone and really unique sounding. And it's great that you're making that inroad at Dice Tower. It's to get sports games into that broader gaming, ecosystem, and you've got that kind of that card based, I mean, colorful. That's the way that people are playing these days. So I mean, this is a really important thing that you're doing to kind of shine light on these types of games.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Our goal is really to make modern board game mechanisms allow the sports, because sports games are just naturally like head to head conflict and really good storytelling. We love the teams that we love because there are such great stories around them. You think about the 70s Steelers, those four championship teams, and none of that starts unless the immaculate reception kicks it all off, you know? And people forget that just before, well, not people, younger people, but like, some people forget that right before that, Stabler had this massive run down the sideline to score the touchdown that put him up with under a minute to play. Like nobody remembers that because they're like Franco Harrison. Yeah, but like, so the back and forth, the tug of war makes the games fun and compelling and memorable. And that's what we're trying to recreate with Breakaway Football is getting that kind of storytelling out of the game system. And I think a lot of sports games do that naturally. Like you can play any football game and you're going to get that tug of war and oh yeah, on 3rd and 12 and he wasn't able to complete it and I blocked the punt and like so there's natural storytelling, but Breakaway Football just tries to enhance that with the flavor text and with the plausibility of how frequently things happen in the game. It needs to line up with real football, and it does.
I think when you see what Keith is doing with second season at play, his narrative style, I mean, you're kind of in that same wheelhouse, and you're
Yeah.
really both in the vanguard of kind of taking the traditional methodology forward, and that's again, it's going to be huge. And it's interesting. If you would kind of talk about the origin of Breakaway and your team, because unlike a lot of these traditional, APBA and Strat,
Mm.
or even Fourth Street, or Clark and Addison, Brian Hafferkamp. You're not a one man shop. You're not a
Right.
you've got a team here. And so, how did that kind of assemble, and how did Breakaway come to be?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am a very lucky person that I've met some wonderful people in my life, and I've worked very hard to keep them close. I always like to collect good people, and we all have an affinity for football in some form or fashion. And it really was just trying to find an opportunity to do cool things with my friends. So I'm a huge football guy, probably the biggest of the group, and I started a board game company with two other partners, Mark Burlett and Ben Jennings, and it was really just an opportunity for us to get together weekly and kind of design games and just hack around and have fun. We decided to start with a football game because I was the most passionate of the three and I wanted to start with a football game. And they said, okay, as long as we can do other stuff, that's fine. I'm like, yes. So as we started building the game, it really started off as a labor of love between myself and Michael Kaplan, who's the fourth designer. We all went to either high school or were friends in college. And Mike was in town one day and we kind of just started sketching things out on index cards. We used a cribbage board as the actual field. And from there, I actually recorded, I typed up, and I still have it, two of the like after action reports. And it was so fun to kind of go back and look at what worked and what didn't and talk about what could be better. So throughout, 2017, 2018, we kind of built this framework of, hey, this game kind of works. And every time we'd play it, I would hold my breath and go, is it going to break? Is today the day that it breaks? And after like 3 years, I said, all right, it's not going to break. It's fine. But it's just an opportunity to be closer with friends of mine who are also football fanatics. But the thing for me as a designer that I really get a lot of joy out of is creating new franchises. It's about expressing the personality of a team without focusing on the individual players. I grew up as a strat player. I love stratomatic football, but it takes a lot of time. And I just, as an adult, I didn't have enough time to play it. I could never get it to the table. So Breakaway was like, how can we cut the time in half, but still have that same enjoyment? And so that's really the genesis of the idea was let's see if we can cut Stratomatic in half and, not focus on players so much, but kind of express that. So like just one more thing really quickly. If you talk about we name the teams differently from the actual NFL names because we didn't want to run afoul of any copyright infringement or anything like that. So none of the names, so we always list in the description of the team, this is inspired by the 1985 Chicago Bears, but they're called the Rhinos, which makes no sense and it's fine. But the color schemes are pretty similar. And the idea is that we do helmet design so that you can kind of glance at it and go, oh, I know who that's based on. Like if you see our Minutemen, which is a 2007 Patriots, it looks enough like a Patriots helmet that you can kind of forget that it's not and pretend that it is, especially when you're playing the cards on the board. The cards themselves, the offensive and defensive cards, share the color scheme. And probably one of the bigger aha moments is when I found a website that had the exact um, CMYK colorings for all of the teams. And I'm like, yes, I didn't have to guess or pull pictures and use the little eyedropper. So now, probably the last 20 to 24 teams are magnifique. The cards look amazing, and they're UV coated because the game crafter, the quality of their product is really strong. Like their components are great. So it all like takes a village, but we also do a lot of testing on Tabletop Simulator.
Mm.
So coming out of COVID, everybody's locked up, and I'm like, well, let's get something done. So I figured out how to use Tabletop Simulator, how to import the graphics into TTS so that we could just test teams remotely. Then we did a tournament, et cetera, et cetera. So we just have this opportunity to rapidly prototype very, very quickly in Tabletop Simulator, try a team out, make sure that we kind of smooth off the rough edges and make sure that it expresses the personality of the inspiration, the team that inspired them. So sorry, I'm talking a lot.
That's excellent. So, explain a little about Tabletop Simulator and how you use it.
So Tabletop Simulator is it's a little clunky, but it's awesome. Like it's so good. Basically, it's a way to play games remotely with other people. So unlike Board Game Arena or any of the other sites that have mass market games or games that are in wide distribution that have been built by computer programmers and like you can play those, Tabletop Simulator allows you to import your own graphics and kind of create your own components on a blank table. So what we did was use the real graphics from Breakaway Football, import them into TTS, and then basically make what's called a workshop. So anyone in the world can buy a copy of Tabletop Simulator, which is not ours. It's just a thing. Usually it costs 19.99 US. Sometimes they have like a 50% off sale, which is great, but it's totally worth the 20 bucks because then you can connect with anybody else in the world who also has a copy. And it's just, it's server connection that you can play a game. And so one person can host a game and have, say, Breakaway Football, and then the other person or people can join in and then manipulate components on the table and play as well. It's got an audio component that many years ago wasn't very good, so we actually use a separate. I think we use Facebook Messenger for audio, and then we kind of leave it, and you can use Discord or whatever you want. But it's a great way to just connect with people and actually play the game for real on a virtual table.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you've got, as you said, 42 franchises,
Mhm.
iconic teams. Do you plan to create full seasons, say the entire 76 season, something like that?
So it's unlikely that we would do it. Part of what makes Breakaway Football harder to scale than, say, any other game where full seasons are released is that the card, like developing the card set, is unique for each team, and so to do that would require a ton of work on our end, and we're not really committed to that. However, we do have a new product called Breakaway Football Team Creator, which allows any motivated individual to do exactly what you just said. So you could literally take any pro team from 1958 to modern day and plug it into the process. And I think it's a 56-page rule book. It sounds onerous. It's a small book, and we just have a lot. It's big font. I'm old. It's big font. It's easy to read. But yeah, we kind of reverse engineered how the process worked for developing the franchises because in the first, say, 16 teams, we didn't have a large sample size. We were kind of working off of guesswork, but the initial framework was so good that we were able to get our guesswork really close, in large part because I did an entire matrix where I said, okay, I'm going to take every possible offensive play for the teams in the box, and I'm going to match that up to every possible defensive call and make sure that there are no outliers. So I did that. I took several days and just kind of mapped it all out. And I'm like, ooh, these three aren't good. We need to make adjustments there. So we ended up having this really good framework of, as long as you stay within these parameters, teams will function the way they're supposed to and nothing will break. So we just kind of carried that forward into this rule set. So anyone in the world can get a copy of Team Creator and go out and grab the actual statistics of, let's say, the 76 bucks. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Maybe you hate yourself, right? But
Everyone
if you,
wants to do it. Everyone wants to. You got
I mean,
to.
the definition of lovable losers. But yeah, if you go out there and do it, you would be able to generate a deck that would play the way they would play with the appropriate strength against any other published breakaway team or any other custom made breakaway team. They all work together, and they all work within the expansions that are available for breakaway football, like the weather expansion, where you can play in rain, wind, and snow, or red zone, which is a way of super simming games in a small footprint. Breakaway football takes 90 minutes to play. Both the solo and the head to head take about 90 minutes to play. Super simming through red zone takes anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes to play. So you can get plausible results between these iconic teams. If you're playing out a full season, you don't have to sit there and slog through every 90-minute contest. Actually, one of my friends who started a large league and is doing this, he has decided to use red zone for almost all of the games, but he chose a special matchup for Monday night, and he's playing AI against AI. He wants to watch the full game. So it's actually a really good spectator sport. I've had a few people mention on Board Game Geek, has anybody thought about Breakaway as just a purely spectator activity? And I'm like, yes, it's a delightful game to watch. Sometimes it's really stressful to play, but it's super fun to watch.
Nice, nice. Do you think that's a possible gateway for younger players? Do you see your audience skewing a bit younger at times?
I think that's a great question, Jeff. I think the newer teams are the way that younger players would sort of get interested in this, and then it would allow them kind of a gateway to the past. I mean, the teams that I'm most interested in are from my childhood, so 70s, 80s. Like the Super Bowl 13 rematch. Those are two of my favorite teams in the entire game. They're called the Horsemen and the Blacksmiths in Breakaway Football, but it's the Cowboys and Steelers.
Right.
And we had, and it's out on YouTube if you want to go watch it. It just so happened that we had a winter tournament, and those two teams were in different brackets, and they ended up in the final. Like a lot of people go, you didn't put your thumb on the scale. I'm like, nope, no, those teams made the final because they're good. And then they played each other, and it was two of the best coaches, most experienced coaches that we have. And it came down. It was a nail biter. It came down to the last few plays. So it couldn't have gone any better. And the final score was damn near the real final score from the actual game. So, I mean, those are the and the Super Bowl. We do a Super Bowl replay, or excuse me, we call it a pre-enactment. So we
Mhm.
play about a week before the Super Bowl. I use basically the team creator rules to create the two teams that have made the actual Super Bowl. And my friend Michael Kaplan, who's one of the designers of the core box, he and I play out what that might look like. And this last time when we played the Chiefs and the Eagles, uh, 49ers. Who was the last one? It was 49ers. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
because we played every year for the last 5 years, so we've done this year over year. But yeah, the 49ers Chiefs game was almost dead on. And we even predicted that Harrison Butker, if given the chance, would make a 57-yard field goal. Like, it's on their card that they get a free one if he's given the chance. So it was amazing to see so much alignment between the gamification of real life and how real life actually played out. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I could talk about this for a year, please.
Me too. Me too. This is great. No, that's incredible. So, and it's interesting because being that you're focusing on iconic teams, you're starting from the point of normalizing
Mhm.
across eras, which is always a big question. Everyone wants to play cross era. That's part of the fun. The 62 Packers and the 78 Steelers and
Yeah.
the 85 Bears and the 92 Cowboys. So it's curious that I mean, what was your starting point statistically to say this is kind of these are our baselines and how you kind of
Yeah. That's another great question. I did a lot of plug and chug, like really brute force mathematics to
mm,
figure out, in this particular era, what's the likelihood of a game being 300 yards, 320, 350. So essentially, what I did was I figured out, all right, what are the lines of demarcation from 1958 to modern times to figure out what the different ages are. And there's general consensus on this. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm some expert, but to me, it made sense to go from 58, which of course is the greatest game ever played, right? That's got to start the clock.
yeah,
And you have to have a Unitas and who's it, Raymond Barry and who's the tight end? John Mackey. Like,
yeah,
a team, come on. So they start, and then where do you end, right? Like, what's the next line of demarcation? To me,
so,
it's sort of the 70s defenses, right? And the defenses that had a lot of names, So you have this whole age of defense where
right,
it's like, this is what we do. So from the late 50s into the 70s, but then they had a pretty significant rule change, that Mel Blunt rule in
yep,
78, I believe,
yep,
where it really restricted the amount of contact that receivers could have outside of that 5 yard window. And so
Mhm.
now you don't have guys getting clubbed in the head and they're like, oh, well, I guess it's incomplete. Like, well, no, you don't get to do that anymore. And of course, the passing numbers started to skyrocket. That's when you see Dan Fouts breaking records year over year. You've got Dan Marino setting the benchmark for 20 something years. So we go from 78 until about the early 90s. And I call that the age of offense because things really did ramp up there. And I picked the 93 94 time frame as the line of demarcation because that's the start of free agent, the modern free agency. And that's where you have more of an emphasis on parity. So teams are able to kind of flex and get better a lot faster than they used to. And good teams degraded a lot quicker than they used to. You don't have the 49ers of the 80s because they can't retain all this amazing talent because they were great in the draft. That's when the Cowboys started to fall off because the Cowboys were like through the roof in drafting well in the 60s and 70s, and they were able to hang on to that talent for a long time and build this dynastic thing. And in the 80s that really kind of fell apart. Now of course we have their resurgence in the 90s, and that is like the last sort of breath of that kind of dynastic capability because they could hang on to all this premium talent. So once you start kind of losing and gaining talent really quickly, you have this kind of leveling out. And that really lasts until about 2010, when a lot of the rules changes are to protect the quarterback, to make it even easier for receivers to gain separation. And so those are basically the four ages: the age of defense, the age of offense, the age of parity, and then the age of passing. So, I mean, those are just my titles, but the different formulas come out of, okay, well, now I've got my date ranges. Let me look at how the numbers actually play out in those date ranges. And so I went to a lot of the websites that have these statistics, did a lot of spreadsheet work, which I enjoy. I'm a math guy, like I enjoy that stuff, and just figured out like what are the likelihoods of like how many yards per game was a team on average going to get in the different ages. And of course it was lower in the age of defense and it was higher, every consecutive age. So we had a good way of saying, okay, well, relative team strength. Like if you took the greatest show on turf from 99 Rams of 99 2000, that's the Bighorns in our game, which will be there at Canton, Ohio if you want to play them. But if you take them and you play them against like the 72 Dolphins, are the Dolphins going to be able to stop that passing attack? And so you can play this out and find out whether they can. The short answer is kind of. they they'll be able to shut them down in fits and spurts, but not entirely. But if that Rams team tries to run against the no name defense, that is a bad idea. So I mean, these are just like common concepts. I think any really hardcore football fan can look at that and go, "Oh, that makes sense." Yeah, I would expect like the purple people eaters to be harder to run on, and to get good pressure against the pass. Yeah, I could see that. So those are the kinds of what if matchups that breakaway football is intended for.
Nice. And I mean, the 58 Colts, I mean, what because you're talking about in those eras, teams are built not only to, they're built to compete in their divisions and they're
Yeah,
built to compete with, with what the rules will allow. So, the 58 Colts spanning up to say those 99 Rams or the '07 Patriots. I mean, you've gone through 3 eras really, and you've
yeah,
got that basic two receiver, one tight end set versus a million packages. How
right.
is there? How do you decide a percentage, or what ultimately from your work became the percentage of? Look, here's the likelihood that these a 58 Colts team built to compete in that plotting blood and
Yeah.
guts era is going to compete against the high flying team with just about no limits.
Yeah, that's a great question. We end up using the concept of efficiency versus explosiveness, I think is really the right way to say it. So the newer teams tend to have higher values in the passing game slightly, which gives them more explosiveness, more ability to kind of gobble up yards in a big play. However, the previous teams, like the older teams, are more brutally efficient, especially on the ground game. The 72 Dolphins are a great example of this. And some people are like, I can't believe you made them that powerful. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. This is Don Shula. Like I didn't do. But what the way we express that is when you compare card values, there's let's say I call a run play. And so the run play has a one digit strength value. It's usually between 1 and 4. Some teams that are really good have a 5. And then, so that play has a particular value. And I'm going to compare that to the defensive card run value. And so those are, again, anywhere from 4 down to 0. And so basically, if you call a strong pass defense, the run component of that is going to be very small because all of your focus is on pass. So I might have a zone that's a 1 against the run, but a 4 or even a 5 against the pass. So if I'm going to run, a power run of 4 into your garbage zone of 1, I'm going to get a value of 3 to start, and each one of those numbers is an increment of 5 yards. So I've broken a 15-yard run essentially. Now we'll flip the game day card and see if it helps or hurts, or if we can ignore it. Half the time you ignore it, which is really nice. So it's not like it puts the thumb on the scale. It just provides the right proportionality. So yeah, I busted out for 15. Okay, well, let's do it again. Well, you're concerned that I might throw, and so you put down your same stupid zone again, of a 1-4, and I go ahead and run, a finesse run like a counter, and it's a 3. 3 against 1 is 2, so now I've got 10 yards. So in the last 2 plays, I've gotten 25 yards on you, and you're still sitting back in a dumb zone. So now it's like, okay, well, what do I do? I mean, I gotta look. And so it's really about the tug of war of when do I change from that and go to pass. So the older teams have generally higher values in the run plays, but they also have these little white bubbles on the cards that provide minimum gains. So let's say that they only have a 2, and I decide I'm getting you this time. I'm going to put up my goal line defense, which has a 4 run value. I'm going to stuff you. Okay, but they have the little bubble that says before you pull the game day card, this provides a minimum gain of 1. So even if I have a 2 run value on the offense, you have a 4 on the defense, I got my little bubble. And as long as there's no breakaway relationship, as long as you didn't call the perfect play against that play type, I'm going to get 1. And that's how the older teams are more competitive on the ground than the newer teams. Conversely, the newer teams have higher completion percentages, and so to kind of balance that out, we have some pass plays that are considered low accuracy. There's a little target icon on the card that tells you that's low accuracy. Those are 50-50 balls, and so that way we can tune how good a team is passing without changing the game day deck. So for example, the 85 Bears, the Rhinos, almost all of their plays are low accuracy because their passers, I think the total team passing was like 52, 53% on the year. Because, McMahon had the bad back and he only played like 3 quarters of the time. And Steve Fuller was the backup. Like, don't get me started on Steve Fuller. So, that's that's what you get. But their runs, they had Walter Payton and they had a great offensive line. So a lot of their runs have these minimum gain bubbles. So you can grind it out and basically rope a dope and kind of set up your opponent and go deep over the top and get to Willie Galt. And I think their long pass is a 9, which is the highest value of any team. So like this is how we tune the strength of the decks. Everybody's got 15 offensive cards and up to 10 defensive cards. Like the teams are the teams. But the decisions about what play types, the strengths of those, whether they're low accuracy or not, all of that is meant to express the personality of that squad. And I think we do a really good job of it. And the nice thing for the player, one last thing, the nice thing for players, you don't have to worry about any of that. You just pick up the cards and you decide what you want to play.
So it sounds as though you're kind of building in. We talk a lot about quotas and player usage. If you didn't have a breakaway run, you don't get that breakaway run. If you're doing a a carded player game, player by player versus team game. But so it sounds like you're kind of building in a little bit of a quota. ST with his matchup football, who by the way, his story is kind of matches yours, having a bunch of friends who create a game. I think
Nice.
connect on that. He's got he is a very staunch proponent of, kind of, you have this number of plays and you don't use this kind of play for this kind of a team. So it sounds like you're kind of building in the guardrails, if you will, so that you can't misuse a team or overuse.
Yeah, he's right, and I that's our approach is that we have one team that's not based on a pro team. They're called the Boneyard, and it's a flex bone college style offense. They're based on the Navy midshipman from 2015, and they run like the wind. In fact, they're probably a little overpowered. Like, shh, don't tell anybody. Because they have this momentum track, and so they can really get going, and it can create problems. But 90, what is it? No, it's 84 or 85% of their plays are runs.
Mm.
And so what we found was it created a degenerate strategy where you could throw a lot more than that team actually would. And so to counter that, instead of having every card, I have 15 cards, but every card has two plays, a top and a bottom. So what we did was we consolidated all the pass plays on the same cards. So you can only throw twice in a quarter, essentially, unless you're going to burn timeouts to do it. But that kind of keeps in line the proportionality of how often it should happen. But we don't put guardrails on a team that say you can't do X, Y, and Z. What we do is build into the design the incentive to do the thing that the team was good at. So you can play against type if you have a running team and you want to throw over the top. Knock yourself out. It's just a little harder to do because they're just not as good at it. And you look at the deck and go, oh, wow, they have really good outside runs and they have really good short passes. Well, maybe I'll lean on those. But then, of course, your opponent's going to key in on that. So you have to balance. All right, well, how do I catch them looking for the opposite of an outside run, which in breakaway is actually a finesse run, blows up an outside run. So it's the counter. You're going outside, then you cut back inside, and that creates the big dynamic play. Like the zone, the thing that beats a zone is a special run, which is like a draw play.
Mm.
So if you run a draw play against the zone, it'll blow it up. It doesn't guarantee tons of yards, but it guarantees the opportunity to pull tons of yards. We'll see what happens. And so that kind of tension of, oh, well, have I called the right play? And then boom, you have. There's another added tension of, okay, well, now we're going to start pulling randomly from the game day deck and see how good it is. And that's probably one of the other things I wanted to mention, Jeff, is that um, because there are no players in breakaway football, there's no player cards. We wanted to still express the ability for people to make mistakes, not
Mm.
the coaches who are playing it, but the actual players on the field. So many times you've seen coaches make the perfect call or damn near perfect call and somebody on the field messes it up. So that feels bad to a board gamer because it's like, man, I did the right thing and I got hosed.
Yeah.
So if you call a breakaway, you're always going to get something good out of it. So if you get the perfect relationship, you're always going to get good. But if it's a non-breakaway relationship, there is some risk coming out of the game day deck that you could have a pass interference call or a intentional grounding or whatever that'll actually mess it up. To hedge against that, though, because we do recognize that just straight luck is bad, um, everybody has two challenge flags. Well, almost everybody. Most of the teams have two challenge flags. Those challenge flags can be used to counteract the center value of a game day card. So if, for example, I do get this debilitating penalty that's going to end my drive, I can say nope, and I play my challenge flag, and that doesn't happen. So now we just get the result of the play. It also creates a really nice catch-up mechanism because once you've used your challenge flags, you can't get them back unless you are tied or losing, and you can only get one of them back. So it always allows the team that is behind an opportunity to re earn this thing that will mitigate luck in their favor. And it really helps keep the games tense and tighter without putting the thumb on the scale of, well, you're winning by 10, so the other person needs a chance to catch up. No, the way you earn that challenge flag back is you have to call a breakaway. So you have to call the perfect play, and then you have won not only the chance to get this big play, but you've also provided yourself a little extra luck.
Excellent, excellent. Let's focus a little more on stats here.
Sure.
I got about 4 questions related to that. So you say your team creator, which just came out. I'm
Mhm.
glad that you start at 58. Is there any, because data does exist up till about 1950. I mean, if you want to
Yeah,
call the 50 Rams a great show on turf, you could go back a little farther. I mean,
you
they
could.
they started doing stats in 32, but they're not great. So, will a team creator, would that allow you to maybe fudge it? Could people kind of engineer
Yes.
their way? Okay.
Yes, yes. Now, I'm not. Look, there's no breakaway football police that are going to come to your house and say you can't do a Tom Fears Rams team. Like, no, like enjoy, knock yourself out. But we chose 58 because it was just the beginning of the modern age of football. Really that moment of the television broadcast and the fact that it was the first overtime, championship game, and like there's just so many good reasons to start telling the story right there. But no, I have no problem with folks going back even into the earlier 50s. I think it would get problematic if you tried to go into the 40s,
Mm.
especially the kind of World War II era of the 40s, because some teams combined their rosters, and a lot of people were in the service. So like I don't think there's a lot of value there. And the game in the 30s was just a very different game. Like the forward pass didn't work the way it works now. So I think that would be tough.
But if you want to do the Steagles, you could have
Oh,
at
right, exactly. Or the pit cards or whatever.
it.
Yeah. Or was it
Oh
card
man.
pit? I can't remember, but yeah. Yeah, good stuff.
So in terms of, again, it's not quite guardrails, but in terms of your solo mode, your AI and keying there, because in APBA football, some folks don't like to use the keying method. If you're not playing head to head, Stratomatic has a 50-50 guess right, guess wrong kind of a component. I kind of use
Yeah.
that in APBA. So I just wonder, did you statistically, is there anything statistically to help certain team? Will the 85 Bears key, the 72 Dolphins more often than, a lesser defense?
No, actually, no. The direction we chose, that's another good question, Jeff. You're on a roll, man. It's like you've done this before, right? No, the thing that we chose to focus on with the AI wasn't the strength of the team because that's already expressed in the deck and the mechanisms. It's really about its decision quality. So we
Mhm.
wanted to focus on how would a real person make the decision of what play to call in any given situation. And normally, like if you look at any game, you're looking at the score, the down, the distance, the pattern of the game, the tendency of your opponent. There's probably like 19 different things that you're subconsciously taking into account when you make a play decision. Well, we can't represent all of that on a piece of paper. So we kind of made the big list and then started to kind of cross out the things that were ancillary, nice to have, not need to have. And when we got down to the need to have, it really was down, distance, and the attitude of the play caller. So we express that. The way it works is you roll a die to pick a formation. So, like, let's just take the offensive AI for a second. Um, First of all, each AI sheet is tuned specifically to the team that it represents. So we don't have like a blanket AI that applies to all teams. Each team has its own AI sheet, and that guarantees that the team performs the way it's supposed to. Because some of them are pass teams, some of them are run teams, and you don't want to artificially hamstring a team by trying to make one thing that fits everybody. So we have one for everything. So the paper already knows what it does well. So the way the user interacts with it on offense, they'll roll a die to find out what formation it is. And so in breakaway football, you've got up to three formations. There's only one team that has four, and that's the Sinners. That's the Saints from 2018 because they had a double quarterback formation they used pretty regularly with Taysom Hill and Drew Brees. So we couldn't leave that out. But in general, the teams have up to three formations: run heavy, balanced, and pass heavy, and those will be uh, cosmetically tuned to the actual formations that those teams would use most frequently. How do we know this? We watch a ton of game film and figure out what they're in. So most of the time it's I form for run heavy, pro set for balanced, and it's going to be shotgun for pass heavy. So that's kind of what it is out of the core box. So if somebody comes out in I form, that card goes down on the board first. The offense makes their selection first. The defense needs to see what formation they're using, and they're going to make their decision based on that. What's the likelihood that they have a run versus a pass? What are some of the ranges of potential play strengths that are going to come out of that? And all of that feeds the defensive decision. So when I'm a human player on defense, I want to know what formation they're coming out in because it's going to influence what I choose to do. That models the head to head game. It's the exact same information that's required in the head to head game. This is one of the reasons why it feels like you're playing a person because you're making the same kind of decision. Um, One of the things we do with the AI is we allow it to cheat. It's very elegant. It's not unfair. It's really to balance its decision quality against yours. People are smarter than paper. And so to reflect that, people have to discard their offensive cards after they use them. The AI does not. The AI has access to all of its play calls all of the time. So it can do what a real person can't, which would be call long pass twice in a row if the situation warrants it.
Mm,
So that's a difference. So you really do, as a human, have to consider, okay, I'm playing against their entire playbook every down. So I need to be very cautious or careful about what I'm going to do. And you can start to kind of figure out what their tendencies are. Okay. So on the AI sheet, there's three different columns. There's green 18, blue 80, and red 98. So those are attitudes. In
mm,
general, the core box teams are conservative, balanced, and aggressive in their attitude. But as I got deeper into the teams and they became more specialized and more nuanced, I found out that that didn't work. And so green might mean for some teams, they're trying to get 1 yard line. This is what they're going to do in short yardage situations. So it doesn't mean conservative necessarily. It just means they're trying to get 1 yard line. So these are the plays that work for that. Might be a lot of things that have a lot of minimum gains of one, and there might be one or two plays in there that kind of subvert that expectation where they would go play action pass over the top just to make sure that you can't lean too heavily on one strategy. And blue might mean something else where it's the kind of thing where they're in the middle of the field and they're always going to try to get, two or three. And then the red might be exotic plays where they're going to try, reverses and whatever. But each team's attitude is different. And there's no way to look at the sheet and know what their attitude is. You really have to figure it out by seeing plays come out of those colors, and you start to kind of tune into the types of stuff that they're doing. You're like, man, every time he's in blue 80, he's running screen. Like, why are they doing so? All right, well, fine. Then I'm going to load up a zone next time he goes blue 80. And of course, that's when they run a draw and they get you on a big breakaway. And you're like, what? This sorcery. So this is why it feels like you're playing against a person, because you really are trying to diagnose why are they doing what they're doing in these different calls. And to me, that models what a real football team would experience. The quarterback's at the line going, green 18, green 18. You can hear that, and then here comes the play. And you're like, okay, I'm going to use this imperfect information to my advantage and see if I could spot trends or tendencies.
Right.
Um, Also, the coding on the front, you really only rolled two dice. One gives you the formation, one gives you the play call. So your level of effort as a human is I'm going to roll a d6 twice, and I'm going to find out what they're doing. And what's nice is you can actually play it right off of the sheet. You don't need to go grab the card. Some people like to because it just aesthetically is very pretty to have the cards on the board. But you can totally just play it off the sheet if you wanted to, because on the back of that sheet is all of the potential play calls that are coded, and the coding is nonsensical terms that kind of feel football related, like Smoke Joker or Mike Dragon or Jet Razor. It's things that I've heard
Yeah.
quarterbacks actually say. And so it's a grid. It's a 4x4 grid, and basically, if it's Mike Razor, then you're going to go find Mike, go down to Razor, and you're going to see what the play call is. So the beauty is that the locations of the different play types is different in each formation. So you've got three different formations. You've got a grid of 12 potential play calls, and you've got three different attitudes. So there's no way that you're going to, in 90 minutes, decode that. Like, it's too much. The juice is not worth the squeeze. So it really gives you the permission as the human player to not worry about trying to second guess the system. Instead, you're paying attention to the play calls that are coming out, and you're really trying to diagnose them as though they were a person. And that's why it works so well, because it's easy to implement and it lets you kind of forget that you're playing paper, and it allows you to pretend that you're playing against a real person. And the other thing that's really great about it is that we've leaned out as much as possible dumb calls.
Mm.
So, like, all of the calls that come out are plausible and appropriate. They're not perfect, but they're plausible and appropriate. You can absolutely go, oh, I can see why you called that. And so that all helps kind of build that fiction of I'm playing against the real intelligence here. This is the hell's this guy going to do next? So that's why I'm really really proud of it.
Nice, nice. Fumbles, interceptions,
Mhm.
penalties, sacks. Are those hardwired into these franchises? You'll get that percentage, that rough outcome, or is there leeway to strip the ball, force an interception, something that kind of a team has a really bad penalty day, something like that.
Yeah. Some teams are better at that than others. I like to think of the Goliaths, who are the 1986 Giants,
Mm,
are really good at stripping the ball because Lawrence Taylor coming off the edge with the big tomahawk chop, like that's a thing. So they have the ability, they have a special ability to actually do that. Um, but the sack ratio, like, there's a lot of different ways that can happen. It could be the special event on the front of the game day card. There's a couple of sacks that just naturally occur. Also, if you get a breakaway and there's a negative value in excuse me, a defensive breakaway, and there's
mhm.
a negative value in the defensive corner, that is a loss of yardage, which on a pass play would be a sack. So those just happen naturally through the course of the game. But yeah, those teams who are really good at it do have an extra mechanism that allows them to press that advantage and kind of create those opportunities. Yeah.
I suppose it matters less for your game than for teams that are, games that are doing full seasons, because folks replay the entire season in actuality, and they want to really dial in. Some folks want to get it down to a hundredth or a thousandth of a percent of accuracy, whereas in this case,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, that's something I've always struggled with because I and you can tell me if I'm wrong because I might be wrong here, but I've seen like two camps of thought. One is if I'm going to do a statistical simulation, I want it to mirror real life to the tenth of the percentage point, and I'm like, okay, but then there's not a lot of room for change. Oh, all right. I mean, it's faithful to what happened, but is it faithful to what could have happened? And that's the other camp is like, I want something that's proportional in strength so that I can see if my superior coaching can allow the lovable losers to overcome their foolishness and actually win this damn thing instead of what happened in real life. And I think I ascribe more to that second one, which is I would like to have more agency in what happens. I want to take the Saints. Let's just take the damn Saints because we're based in New Orleans, so like we're doing it. The Sinners, the 2018 Saints, are a phenomenally strong offense, especially in the passing game. But they have a what we call a poison pill, which is a mechanism that is bad for them, and it's called blown call. And
uh,
so what it allows is once per game, it's a token that you hand to your opponent at the beginning of the game, and you're like, here you go, and it allows them to ignore one penalty at any point in the game. So it models the ability to have this pass interference that's clearly a pass interference come out of the deck, and the other person's like, nope, that doesn't happen. And you're like, what? It happened. Like, how, ref, how could you not call that? And the first time we tested that team, it was actually Richard Inglis who tested it with me. I played against him, and he had an opportunity that was eerily similar to the real Saints team. He had the ball and completed it down around the 15, and and the pass interference came up, and I played the token so that he wouldn't have the ball at the 15. Instead, it was back at the 25. And he's like, I can't believe you just did that to me. And it threw him off. He had to kick a field goal on that, just like the real Saints did. It's crazy when it kind of lines up the way that it did in real life. So, anyway, those are the kinds of storytelling moments that we're trying to get with these mechanisms, things that are easy for people to conceptualize, easy to deploy in the game, but faithful to real life and to history. So much so that you can really feel like you're taking the 85 Bears and playing them against the like a really fun matchup is the Rhinos versus the Sharks. It's the 85 Bears against the 84 Dolphins. And that's one where we wanted to make sure because that almost happened. Like, in 85 they played and that was the
yeah,
only game the Bears lost. So I wanted to make sure that that matchup made sense. So we played that one a bunch to make sure. And sure enough, 2 out of 3 times the Sharks would win. I'm like, this is crazy. So I love it when the game reflects what's likely to happen, but it doesn't always happen that way, you know.
sure.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, and that begs the question then, what about your testing methodology over time? You talked about the heavy duty math. You're a math guy, and this is, and the sample size question always comes up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the more teams we've created, the closer we get to best practices. I think after the first 16 teams, we felt like we had a large enough sample size that we could start making really good assumptions. And before we had the team creator system, it was a spreadsheet where we'd say, okay, let's go look at the running strength of a particular team that we're going to be scoping. Let's compare that to the run strengths of the teams that already exist, and let's make sure that it nestles in the right spot so that let's say we total up the total value of the cards. So let's say we had a team that had 33 run points and maybe 71 pass points in their playbook. If that team that we're creating now is a much better passing team, then they should at least have 71, if not more. But then you also have to take into account the strength of the mechanism, because you wouldn't want to just tune the playbook and then also give them this mechanism that would then push that valuation way over the top. So it's a combination of those things, and that's what Team Creator actually does. We were able to reverse engineer the quality or value of mechanisms in terms of playbook points. And that way, I can plug in the numbers, the actual statistics from the real team. I can plug it into these formulas and find out what the playbook gives me. Then I can use this other set of criteria to figure out how many mechanisms that team can have, because we kind of stick to 4 as the max. So they can have anywhere from 0, but like teams are boring if they have 0. So they have from 1 to 4 special mechanisms. And a lot of teams that went deep into the playoffs or went into the Super Bowl are the ones that have the most capability, the most excitement. So we base it on those criteria. If the team had a winning season, they can have a mechanism. If they made the playoffs, they could have another one. If they made it to the conference championship, they could have another one. If they won the Super Bowl, they could have another one. You know, like stuff like that. So it makes an objective criteria of, okay, let's see how well the 86 Jets did. Here's how many mechanisms they can have, and then we have a system for figuring out how many bonus points you can use to buy those mechanisms. So I've got my playbook valuation, which is different from my mechanism. And if I end up not having enough points to buy the cool thing that I want, let's say this team was really good at kickoff returns, and I want to have this amazing kickoff returner, and maybe that mechanism costs 5 points, and I only have two. Well, I can take on a poison pill, which is a negative mechanism. It adds a slot, so I can actually have an extra mechanism slot, and it gives me more points to spend on the other thing I want. But it's a negative that I have to take on to counteract that. And so it's almost like creating a character in a role playing game where you're kind of balancing out these different attributes and whatnot. It's very similar to that. The character is just your football team, and then you go play it. You play it in Breakaway, and it works. It's a lot of fun.
Love it. Love it. Injuries, you talk about those the 76 Steelers losing Blyer and Harris. Even though they lost the Raiders starting the season, some folks will insist that they had enough momentum. They would have beaten the Raiders if they had Harris and Blyer.
They would have. I think absolutely 100% they would have. Yeah.
Oh, all right. So
No,
do
definitely. That was the best defense the Steelers ever had in 76.
we,
And they damn near won in spite of losing, multiple superstars. So, but it was just, I think losing Franco so late was insurmountable. That was just like the straw that broke the camel's back. But no, that defense was otherworldly. Didn't they have like three shutouts that year? And
five, I
like,
think.
oh, God, yeah. I mean, just
Crazy.
crazy.
Guess
Yeah.
it was Lambert led team only meeting. It's like we're gonna run the table from 1-4 start, I think,
Yeah.
something like that.
So I
So
think if you were going to create the 76 Steelers, you'd have to, if you're going to be faithful to it, like there's a couple of ways to do it. So some people might want to do the heroes of their childhood version of that team. Like, let's pretend that none of these guys actually got hurt. How good would they have been? Okay. You can kind of guess at what the stats would have been based on 75 and 77. And I guess in some respects 78, but I would leave 78 out
yeah,
because the passing rules are different.
different. Yeah,
So like, you look at 75 and 77, you kind of go, okay, this is probably what they would have had statistically. And then you just plug it into Team Creator and you rock and roll. But I prefer to do more the historicity of it. Like, okay, well, how do we reflect the injury I think Bradshaw got hurt for part of that year. And I know both Blyer and Harris were out at different parts of the year, right?
I think so. Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
so.
it
Yeah.
really comes down to the AFC Championship. But
That's true.
that's the part that sticks out. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
after two Super Bowls, I'm sure they were being targeted a lot. So
Yeah, probably so. But it would be about figuring out what kind of mechanism reflects the degradation of the quality of that team when those guys are out. And then you would probably have some sort of randomizer that says, okay, when I pick up this team to play it on the board, which of these guys is out? One, two, or all three of them. And then that becomes the circumstance that you play under. And yeah, you could just select, okay, I want to play when Franco's out, but these other two guys are in. All right, cool. Well, then here's your negative modifier, and like go forth and conquer. Or you could randomize. You could fully randomize that. I am a fan of randomization within a subset because
yeah,
I don't want, like, I can't control the weather. I didn't wake up today and go 78 and sunny. So when you're going to pick the weather expansion, I don't think, I mean, you can, like, it's your game, you bought it, like, do what you want. But I like the idea of, okay, we're going to pick whether it's raining or whether it's cold. But within that, I want the game to tell me what the weather is. So again, I did a lot of statistical research on weather patterns and based on where the teams are located, I wanted to know like what are likely things that are going to happen. And barring the extremes of it's 55-mile-an-hour winds, that crazy blizzard game that who was it? So the Eagles and the Lions, I think, at 2013 maybe, I don't know, but it was an insane game. So those are outliers, but for the most part, the winds are anywhere from 10 to 20 miles an hour, the temperature's this. And I even looked into uh, one thing I was very surprised by is cold weather games tend to run shorter.
Hmm.
And I think it's because the players are like, it's friggin' cold out here. I want
I
to go
didn't.
inside, you know.
That.
But it's true. And so the way we reflect that in breakaway football, because every team has 15 cards, those are each 1 minute of clock, because that's when you discard. It's how you keep the clock. in a cold weather, and it has to be a significant cold, like below freezing. So in every below freezing game, you start the game by discarding permanently one card from your deck.
Mhm.
Now you're only playing 14-minute quarters, and that reflects that circumstance. So like we've really tried to cover everything and do it in a way that you don't have to worry about it or just think about it too hard. You just do it and then you play and it feels like you're playing in the cold.
Love that. You anticipated my question about, whether, because in the Apple world, you have the A, B, or C offensive index. Most teams are in a
Right.
B, the exceptional A, the really bad's in the C. So 72
Mhm.
today, Buccaneers in the C. And folks have always tried to say, well, we need a weather mod. If it's raining and all the teams are in the C and every run is discounted by a couple of yards. I mean, everyone's just trying to, because it's a huge factor, maybe less so now, today with fewer outdoor teams than it
Sure.
was. But and second season, Keith Avalone, he has regional and seasonal, September through December, South
Nice.
East, so he does something like that. I've always wondered, and I think the folks too, in the 70s, if you're the Dolphins, you're going to wear home whites and make the Raiders, if they're coming to town, and that rare occasion they're going to wear the darks or the Steelers,
Yeah.
whatever. So, and does that have a fatigue factor? So that's the kind of thing. And how about crowd noise and home field advantage?
There are mechanisms for that that are unique to particular teams. I'll come back to the Sinners again. I'm sorry, but they're just a
Sure.
good example of this. They have a mechanism called, gosh, what is it called? We wanted to call it third down noise, but you can use it on other downs.
Hmm.
I think it's home field advantage or crowd noise, something like that. But it allows them to oh, too much noise, maybe I forget. But anyway, you have three tokens that you can spend at any time in the game, and it depends on the down. So and it only works at home because it's a home field advantage. They play in a dome that's very loud. So on defense, you can play these things, and it allows you to pull multiple game day cards, and the defense gets to choose which one
Hmm.
is revealed. So it bends the luck to the defense. It doesn't guarantee success, but it really does put your finger on the scale. So let's say it's fourth and short, and you're going to go for it, and it's the fourth quarter, and the crowd's going nuts, and you run a play. The other team gets to pull four game day cards and pick the one they want. And if one of those is a fumble and you don't have a challenge flag to defend it, well, guess what? You just gave up a fumble because you got rattled by the crowd noise. So it's a great, because it's something that the offensive coach playing against the Sinners has to account for. It might actually prevent you from going for it on fourth down. If you know that they're holding one of these tokens, they're like, well, damn, they're going to get four game day cards and I don't have a challenge flag. I'm at the mercy of whatever comes out of that deck, and there's a good chance something they can use will come out in four cards. Yeah, I'm going to punt. And that is the crowd noise affecting your decision. So, yeah, good stuff.
So
I really like that.
you're really threading that needle between, hey, this is the way these teams play, and that's it, versus there's still going to be that momentum factor and some of the actuality, the intangibles, if you will, which still have some statistical basis.
Yeah, here's another one. The Pilots, who is the Jets of '68. So
Mm.
that's the famous Namath team.
Yeah.
When I did my research on them, I was stunned because I didn't know a lot about them. I knew about the prediction and whatnot, and I watched Super
Great.
Bowl three. I watched it a couple of times, and I
Yeah.
was stunned at how poorly the Colts played in
Yeah.
the red zone. Like just I can see why people are like, "Hey, was the fix in on this one?" Because like they were just bad. But anyway, what I was surprised by is that the Jets had a lot of turnovers on offense and on defense, and like Namath would routinely throw pick sixes that year. I was stunned. So what I noticed was, okay, they have a lot of opportunity for people to return interceptions. So we're going to give them the ability to return any, because normally when you throw an interception in breakaway football, it's just down wherever that happens. So, like if it's a 15-yard pass and you get picked, unless there's a specific card that lets you return that interception, but under normal circumstances, if it's picked, it's just that's where it is. But this team can return all of their stuff, and they're not the only ones who can do it, but they're the ones who are most notable because every turnover is returned as an offensive breakaway. That means if the Pilots throw an interception or if they fumble the ball, it gets returned by the opponent. So the risk is on both sides. It might be something that you can take full advantage of and get a free 6 points on defense, or you may, throw away a lead by accident, have with Namath at a bad throw. And it's very, very true to the way that team performed. The other thing that's really good about that team is they have all their stuff is themed after airplane uh, puns. So they have take off or take flight, I think is what this one is. Anyway, what I noticed is that their defense was brutally efficient at uh, uh, forcing their opponent to lose yardage. And so
Mhm.
they have the ability to force a turnover after they've accrued enough lost yardage. And they have really strong plays. But that's a great example of a team that does not have three formations on offense, because the older teams, this wasn't early in our design, but pretty much from 2019 forward, we tried to design it this way. Older teams only have two formations. They have a run heavy and a balanced, because they didn't really have like these shotgun spread out formations until the 80s, really. So pretty much all the teams from the 70s back just have two formations. The notable exception is the Horsemen, the 78 Cowboys, who really kind of pioneered the usage. They didn't create it, but they pioneered the usage of the shotgun the way we know it today. And so they have a shotgun formation, but it's hamstrung. It doesn't work the way other shotguns do. They get to double the value of their shotgun plays, but only on third down. Because when I watched their game film, I noticed that they would not call it on first and second down. Period. Never came out. It would only come out on third down, and it was deadly efficient. So I'm like, well, gosh, I can't tell people they can't use the play on first down or second down, because that's not how we do it. We don't tell people what they can and can't do. And I'm like, well, if those plays are normally really high valued, I would want to use them on first and second down. So the way we hedged against that was we said, okay, well, all these passes are basically fours, and they don't have minimum gains. So it's a kind of a crappy throw in a time when anybody who plays against this team knows there are no runs out of shotgun, because they didn't run out of shotgun. So if I put up a four value pass, it is very easy for my opponent to go, well, that's a pass. I'm just going to put up a four value pass play, and we'll see you on the next down. So it's really throwing away a down. But
Mhm.
on third down, a four becomes an eight. And an eight is very powerful, because the highest value that you're going to see on a defensive card is six. There's only like eight of those. Out of 42 teams, there are like eight cards that have a six on them. Most of the highest values are fives. And for teams that are age appropriate, those values are highest four. So basically, you're looking at a guarantee of 20 yards unless the game day deck messes with you, or if the breakaway relationship is there. So it just makes them very efficient against their opponents, while also building in a disincentive to use it outside of the way that that team would actually use it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yes, the alien shotgun was crazy. Although the Niners, yeah, they did do it briefly at that, like a decade earlier. But yeah, I mean,
Right, exactly. The alley oop and that kind of thing. Yeah, but they never did make it their signature offense. Yeah.
so what about what's your feeling on including postseason stats in your calculations? I mean, you know,
Yeah, I've gone against it. So I use the regular season as the benchmark for the playbook strength.
Yep.
The postseason really influences the mechanisms. So a good example of that would be the 2002 Buccaneers.
Hmm.
They're called the Privateers in our thing, and they have the ability to what's it called? It's called kill kill. So they can actually do a defensive audible with perfect information,
Ooh.
and because they have a lot of zones, and if you call a lot of zone, it's pretty easy for your opponent to beat that. So it allows them to kind of hedge towards that cover two, the Tampa two that they used to use, but not be stuck in it if their opponent tries to get cute. So they can get out of it. And that's mostly because, and they also can return all breakaways as offensive, all turnovers as offensive breakaways,
Hmm.
because they in the playoffs had a lot of turnovers that went for touchdowns. So I think especially in the Super Bowl, they didn't have two. I think in the Super Bowl
She's like,
that
yeah,
scored touchdowns. Yeah,
right.
they had at least one. So yeah, we try to kind of manufacture, like, the mechanisms need to tell the story of who that team was, and most of the time, the team makes its story in the postseason.
Mhm.
So we try to base the strength of the team off of the largest sample size we have, which is how they do in the regular season, and then the storytelling mechanisms are more about the postseason. Like, one of the hardest teams, because I've been trying to publish the 2008 Cardinals, that
Hmm.
Kurt Warner
Yeah.
team that
Yeah.
damn near won the Super Bowl. Like, if the Steelers don't have two of the most
Yeah.
electric plays in the history of the National Football, the history of the league, two of them within the span of a couple hours, the Cardinals probably win that thing. And so, but if you look at their statistics for the year, they weren't that good.
No.
Barely above 500, but they
No.
just caught fire in the playoffs. So I'm having a hard time figuring that out. So maybe I'll call you later and we'll talk more about that.
What brings up two things: the late season momentum and leadership. I try to do some leadership mods in APBA football. It hasn't really caught on, but also, APBA football. I mean, I hate to single it out, but that's kind of our wheelhouse. And you've had the philosophy change over the years.
Mhm.
If I mean, I hate to say it's absolutely true. It's like 99.9%. I'm 99.9% certain. I've looked at the card a million times that James Harrison does not have the capability to return that
Right.
interception, but you've got to have that, particularly in a team-based game. You just got to
Yeah.
have that, in my view. Now, there are rare plays that he might do that on, and so I wonder how. Well, that actually begs two questions, because you've got. Well, I'm sorry. You want to respond to that
I
first?
have a solution for it. Yeah. And it actually doesn't, to me, it wouldn't be a function of the Steelers. Like, I
Hmm.
don't think it's reasonable for it was Harrison, right? James Harrison who did that. I don't think it's reasonable for him to have the ability to do it. I think it's more likely that the Cardinals created the opportunity for that to occur to them. Because if you look at there was a game against the Jets that they had in the regular season where Favre lit them up, scored like 40 something points. And it was a runaway game until like the middle of the third quarter. And then the Cardinals inexplicably woke up and went, wait, we're a professional football team. And they started to climb back into the game. And so the more I saw that, the more I thought, okay, these amazing plays that the Steelers have made isn't because the Steelers are awesome as much as the Steelers are taking advantage of what the Cardinals are leaving open. And so the quality of the Steelers plus the inefficiency of the Cardinals makes these amazing plays happen. So I'm hoping that I can kind of get that tuned just right. But yeah, some teams just take it on the chin. Some teams just luck works against them. And like here's a great example: the 1980 Houston Oilers. We just published this team. They're called the Drillers, and they are so much fun. And I was never a Houston Oilers fan. I really wasn't. But oh my God, Earl Campbell in his prime, and Snake Stabler, and like, oh, it's so good. But anyway, that team has a special mechanism called bum rap, and it's because it's because when I was watching game film, I think it was the year before they were in the AFC Championship and they lost to the Steelers, but they had this iconic play where they threw a touchdown to, I want to say it was Renfro, and the guy caught it. He had 2 feet down, and the refs called it incomplete. And there was no instant replay back then. If they'd had it, they could have watched it back and seen that the guy made this amazing catch. But they called it incomplete, and I think they had to settle for field goal, and that really tanked that game for the Oilers. It kind of affected them emotionally. I also saw another time in the regular season where a guy fielded a punt. I keep wanting to say Drillers. The Oilers punt returner fielded the punt, and he turned the corner. He went 76 yards for a touchdown. Sidelines going nuts. The place is great. And then the announcers. It took the announcers like a moment to kind of catch up and go, wait a minute, they're spotting the ball back at the 20. Like, what gives? And it was an inadvertent whistle, and the refs took away a perfectly legal touchdown because, like idiots, they blew the whistle too quickly. I'm like, oh, this has to be a mechanism. This has to be a thing. They keep taking it on the chin. This is what it's like to be an Oilers fan. Okay, we got to have that. So, like, we have to make sure that when I say we, I mean the designers have to make sure that we're not overly putting our thumb on the scale to always have them fail. It's just that it's an opportunity, and really what we do is, instead of saying, oh, well, when this random thing happens, you get screwed, we actually give that token to the opponent and say, here, this is a little take that. So the bum wrap token is a little red token that you hand over to your opponent, and it allows them to cancel a middle value of a game day card or force a redraw on a corner value. And the corner values are where all the cool stuff happens. So basically, it gives you the ability that, let's say I'm the Drillers and I'm doing a punt return and I pull the touchdown card. Well, in a regular game day deck, there's only one of those corner touchdown cards. So the opponent could just play the bum wrap and go, nope, draw it again. And then you draw it again, it's not going to be a touchdown. It might be a fumble. It might be a zero, and so that models what happened in real life. Again, very effortless and easy to deploy. And it isn't just total randomness. There's actually an element of strategy of when the opponent would play it. You only get one. Once it's gone, it's gone. But yeah, that's how we handle it.
Love it, love it. Yeah, I mean that, and those kinds of mechanisms I've been saying for a while that, again, you on the purely stats based games where it's all numbers and folks are used to that, you if you're trying to introduce these types of games to folks, they may be more used to something that's got that I'm going to play this on you, this negative thing. I've got this one or two or three times, whatever, and those kinds of mechanisms that you've got there should go a long way, I think, to really, if someone says, "Oh yeah, by the way, you remember this," it not only teaches folks, obviously, but it just that's exactly. I mean that's the crux of the '79 Oilers season, '78, '79 back-to-back AFC championships, whereas 60 and 61, they win the AFL championships their first two seasons. And
Yeah,
now almost 20 years later, and it's just, and then in 80, they lose to the Raiders, right? In the
yeah, in the
first
wild
playoff.
card game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which was an ugly game. I watched that one back because and they had plenty of opportunities, and I think it was just not their day.
have you done any of the like the run and shoot Oilers 87, 88, 89?
Yeah, we have the Gunslingers, which is the 92
Oh,
Oilers, whoever blew the lead against the Bills. I think it was
right.
92.
Yeah.
And they have a mechanism called Here We Go Again, which is specifically a way, again, like I'm not picking on the Oilers, like I'm just watching the games and going, how do I make that a thing? So they have to have the ability to blow a big lead, but
Mm,
it's only going to affect them when they're winning. So if they're losing, they don't have a negative, and
right.
they are a very strong team. Like if you look at their deck and kind of look at the way it's constructed, it's very easy to fake one way and do something different that are very complementary and very effective. So they tend to kind of take a lead early. And the only time that I've seen them, and that team went to a championship. They lost, but they went to a championship because we have tournaments on occasion.
Mm,
And when that team was first published, one of our best coaches took that team and took them to a championship. I couldn't believe it. So it is possible to win with this team. It's just that they have four. They're called bullets, right? Because they're the gunslingers, and they shoot themselves in the foot. So they have four bullets, and essentially every time it is first down, they hand a bullet to their opponent. This is only in the second half and only when they're winning.
yep.
So only in the second half and only when they're winning, they hand a bullet over, and that bullet is an extra game day draw. So that becomes a way that their opponent can bend luck to their whim and avoid consequences of terrible things. And so you get these wonderful experiences where, you know, randomly the interception card comes out from the game day deck. And so the gunslingers are going to pick off the ball, and the player plays a bullet and says, nope. And then they pull another card and it's something different. And
Right.
so it's like, yeah, how did that bounce out of his hands? He almost had an interception. Oh, well, it's second down now. And like, so that becomes part of the storytelling. Here we go again. Gunslingers can't hold on to a lead. So all of this is really just to express their personality. But what I can't stress enough is that each team in breakaway football is fundamentally different. Many of these mechanisms are single use and only exist with a particular team. Um, like pump fake is something that we're looking at using for the Cardinals team. They're called the Phoenix, and I've already done the helmets, and like we know what the team's going to be. I'm just working on the mechanisms, but they're going to have pump fake because Kurt Warner did a lot of pump faking. And what was delightful was I went back and looked at the Bighorns, which is the '99 Rams, also with Kurt Warner, and he's got pump fake, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, he does. Okay, well, good. They should have pump fake as well. It just won't be as effective, but like they'll have it. So we really want those mechanisms to express the personalities of the teams, and they are unique to those teams as much as possible. Like the Stallions, this is the 2006 Colts, the Peyton Manning team that won the Super Bowl against the Bears. They have a mechanism called Omaha, and it's a free audible with perfect information. So I can force the
Mhm.
defense, I can lock the defense, look at what they're calling, and then I can rotate my card if I want to. So it allows me to get out of a defensive breakaway. It allows me to maybe get into an offensive breakaway, and I can definitely maximize the value of that play. The problem is though, I have to earn that by running certain plays that have icons on the card. So I don't just get it automatically because what I noticed when watching game film again is that they wouldn't start lights out. They had to kind of establish the pattern and then they'd subvert the pattern. And that subversion would often be a big play, Dallas Clark down the middle for 40 yards or whatever. But they had to establish the pattern first. So the way we do that here is you have to run 5 of these logo plays. And it doesn't matter if they gain or lose yardage, you just need to use them. And then once you've done that, you earn 3 Omaha tokens. And then you can save those or use them whenever you want. When you run out, you can start earning 3 more tokens. So some teams, excuse me, some coaches are actually really good at earning them quickly, using them quickly, earning them again, and hanging on to them till the end of the game. Some people have a hard time earning them, so once they get those 3 Omaha tokens, they hold on to them closely and wait for critical moments in the game to make sure that they're not, that they're calling the right play. Anyway, every team has its own personality, and so every team has its own set of mechanisms.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I mean, that's just wow. That is huge. It's so great to hear what you're doing. Uh, in terms of your community, you mentioned some of your best coaches and some tournaments. Tell us about what your community is kind of like. I mean, do you have small leagues? Is a lot of solo players? Is it heavier in certain regions?
Um, I think it's a pretty eclectic mix. We've got about 300 people, 309, I think, right now in the community, and I'd say probably 10 to 15% of those folks are really heavily active. Where they're posting pictures or videos of replays, where they're sharing when they're playing the games. Um, and it's a very fun community of like-minded football enthusiasts. So no jerks allowed, right? So we have a nice core group of people, and it's just fun to reminisce about football sometimes. There is a little bit of discussion about like which teams would you like to see, and
Mhm.
so we've done some polls and whatnot, and that's driven some of our later expansions, like the '89 Eagles and the 1980 Oilers were two
Mm.
teams that were very high on the list, and I kept telling people I don't know how to design those. They're weird. Those are hard teams to model, but they're both published now, and I'm so proud. They're called the Airy, but the Eagles team
Right.
is so good. It's hard to coach. Both the drillers and the Airy are both pretty tough. Like you have to be experienced to coach them well. They're easy to pick up. You can use them, but like you can't optimize them until you really understand why they do what they do. Like that year, the '89 Eagles, that was Bounty Bowl. If you remember, Bounty Bowl 1 and Bounty Bowl 2 with the Cowboys. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's got to be a mechanism, right? Because that's part of their personality that year.
Right.
We have
Exactly.
to. So there is a way that the Airy can hurt you on purpose. But when they choose to hurt you on purpose, they open themselves up to a personal foul and can extend a play. And they can only do it when they get a breakaway. So you have to call the perfect play, and then you have to choose basically to throw away the result of that perfect play, maybe on a personal foul, because 50% of the time it'll happen. So, but you get this really outstripped benefit. So it's really weighing the risk reward there. And if you can kind of make it through that gate check, then your opponent will have a -1 to either their run or pass, your choice, for the remainder of the half. So you can really degrade the performance of your opponent by calling the right play and hurting key players. And it's just so perfect for that team. They're the only team that can do that on purpose. The Outlaws, which is the '76 Raiders,
Yes.
they also can hurt people, but it's a little more haphazard. And
Mm.
they were a fun team to create. They're a hard team to coach too,
Right.
because they are actually fueled by penalties. So the more penalties they incur, the stronger they get. But you do have to suffer the effect of the penalty. So they collect these win tokens, and it kind of works out to where they end up losing. They're like losing, or they're down at the end of the half usually, and in the second half, it allows them to use uh, all this bank that they've accrued to rapidly catch up in the game. But
Right.
if they do that, then they might start losing again. So it's really tricky. Like you want to work the design to make sure that you're surging at a moment when your opponent won't be able to recover. So you
Mm.
kind of wait until the end of the game to do that. So it's a great way to have players really collude to create those memorable moments, sea of hands, and
Yeah.
the ghost of the post and all that stuff that those teams were known for.
Crazy. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I feel like I didn't answer your question though. What was your what was your question
No, no, that's
earlier?
the community. But I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
that's yeah. I've been really enjoying Chris Buell has been talking about a lot. He
Yeah.
posts on of his game board, looks at the game board and some of his outcomes, which is really helps explain the game. I mean,
Yeah.
that you can see it in real time there. I actually created a mod for the Raiders, just for APBA football. Just whenever Atkinson and Tatum, the safeties from 71 to 77, if there's a long pass that's incomplete, I roll for an injury just if they're on the field.
Nice.
So just
Yeah.
this, it's something about that Raiders team, boy.
Oh yeah.
Down
That was
here.
that was the club to the head. I think they knocked Lynn Swan out of the season opener that
God.
year.
Oh yeah. Well,
Um,
let's not forget, but at the same time, they forget that Mel Blunt was taking Cliff Branch and basically sledging. That crazy era, man.
defense.
Ricky Jones, all those guys. I mean, crazy. What about
You know.
so? Do you have any '60s teams like a Butkus or the '60s Packers, a Nitschke kind of a thing, or
Yeah, we've got the 67 Packers. They're called the Stackers, which I'm very proud of. And probably my favorite old school team is the 1964 Browns. So the
Ah,
last time the Browns won a championship. And
yeah,
that was a tough team to model, but I'm very proud of the result because it's Jim Brown all the way. And
yeah,
so I'm watching all the game film, and I'm sure you'll notice that's the trend as I watch oodles of game film and try to figure out what's the personality of this team almost before I look at their statistics because their stats are going to be there. The stats are the stats.
right,
But what I noticed was that their quarterback, Frank Ryan, I think his name was, he's the
yeah,
professor,
yeah,
super smart. And he actually was pretty successful passing the ball, but really in the second half more than the first half. It was
yeah,
almost like they'd feed Jim Brown and kind of beat you to death with Jim Brown and the other folks. And then, Ryan would kind of throw over the top as a surprise, and it was very effective. So their mechanisms focus on Jim Brown. They have a legendary fullback, is what their system is called. And he has basically 10 activations where he can just flat out break the rules. And because he's Jim Brown, please. So what
right,
he can do is he can either um, ignore I think he can redraw a game day card, or he can ignore the middle effect, or he can just add the top right effect to it. Like he can do all kinds of stuff. And when he's in a breakaway, if you get him on a breakaway, he can make guys miss. He can break tackles. He can make you look stupid, really,
yeah,
is how it works. But he
right,
can only do 10 things in the game. So, and it ends up being fine because most of the time you're going to have 30, 35 plays on offense. Like if time of possession is roughly equal, you're going to have about 33 plays on offense. So the fact that he can do 10 things means that one out of three plays, Jim Brown is doing a cool thing. And you can spend multiple of those on the same play if it's a breakaway. So
wow,
that's where it's like creating this opportunity. If I've got Jim Brown and I've made the perfect call, I got you. And now I can start chaining this engine and really get it going. So you can put together this giant run because I mean you've seen the great runs of all time that Jim Brown's done. Guys run up and they're like, I'm gonna get him, and they bounce off, or he just sort of stops and hops and then keeps going. It's crazy how this guy would run. So you can model that same effect using his ability. But if he does that, and like if you spend a bunch of things to make this epic run, all right, well, you got your highlight, but he's kind of tired for the
yeah,
rest of the game, and
mm,
you got to be real careful. So the other thing is, Ryan has these three tokens again, second half only, but
mhm,
he can ignore low accuracy. So a lot of their passes, because older teams generally have lower completion percentages, so they tend to have more low accuracy passes in their playbook. So his ability to ignore a low accuracy pass means that they're going to be more successful again in the second half. So it just creates this delicious tension of, okay, basically you guys run a lot. I'm going to kind of bow up on the run. And now you're throwing over the top of that and getting 20, 25 yards. And I'm guaranteeing it's going to be complete because I can ignore this low accuracy thing. Eek, maybe I can't overcommit to that, and that creates the tension in the chess match. So yeah, I mean, we try to be faithful to the older teams, what they did well, and we want to really highlight what they did well and give you the opportunity to enjoy doing that. That's why we want to coach these old teams, because we want to do the things that they were good at. So that's what the mechanisms are. Mechanisms are really less about what you can't do or creating obstacles to your success. It's really more about enabling you doing the cool thing that you want to do.
and managing those resources
Yeah.
wisely. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
gotcha.
Like the Pigskins, the 1991 Redskins, they were really, really good at a lot of different things. So they have a bank of five tokens, and that's it. They get five, you can use five, but there's a whole row of things that you could do. There's like four things that you could do at any one time. I think two of them are for offense. I forget, but like it's spread out. One's a special teams. So you can do whatever you want, but you can only do five things in a game. So it's up to you to do the things that are going to have the most impact on the game. And yeah, an experienced coach or a coach that's not really thinking strategically could squander those. And then that team's going to struggle. Or they could be really smart about it and maybe excel. It's up to you. It really is about giving the coach the power to make that team as good as it should be.
Nice. Where are you getting, are you doing your film study right at, say, NFL Films, or going through teams? How are you doing it?
I tend to do a lot of YouTube searches, to be honest. There's a ton of really good archival footage out on YouTube. And Yeah, and I watch as much as I can. Not just that, but I'll go watch, America's game, especially if the team won a Super Bowl, there's going to be a package on that. I'll go back and watch some of the, like in the 70s, they did a lot of these, 60s and 70s, they did a lot of these team season summaries,
Year,
which are kind of
yeah,
painful because you don't see a lot of play, but it does tell you how that team perceived themselves.
yeah.
And so it can give you a really good insight into, this team was all about toughness and grit. You're like, okay, well, that's something we need to focus on then. Yeah,
That's it. I mean, that's what, in this community we talk about. St. Patrick ran a poll on Facebook, Sports Sim Magazine's editor, and it turns out the baseball games are far and away the more popular. I think it's like 64% of players to 12% football, and then everything else, because the statistics are there.
yeah,
But the football, and I think there's also this idea that there's more romanticism and nostalgia and kind of these hallmark moments and milestones for baseball. And sure, baseball, American baseball goes back as an organized, major league farther back, whereas the NFL, 1920 and then 32 and all that. But still, it's so really football capturing these kinds of things. It's football is so much more than the stats, and I'm glad that you're emphasizing that. I hope that folks really get a sense that other designers can maybe try to at least acknowledge some of that in the more stats based games, which yours is, by the way, to emphasize that. And that's a thing that I think even Keith Avalone at second season, folks look at this narrative and these colorful cards, they say, oh, but you don't need to see the stats. It's like a difference between a Mac and a PC. I don't need to see the gory details, just let
yeah,
it works. Trust us, it's there. And if
yeah.
you these things out, it works.
That's a great analogy, Jeff. It's really about using the computer versus coding the computer. And I would rather just use it than have to, go into DOS 5 and type in commands. Like I just want to point and click. And this is kind of a similar experience where you can just enjoy the experience of interacting with the team, engaging with the team, kind of reliving your heroes or playing against, your favorite villains from the past. Because ultimately, that's why we fall in love with these folks. Certainly for me as a kid, you're looking up to them as kind of role models or heroes, or you're looking at them as mythical, legendary beings. And the NFL did a lot of concerted propaganda to kind of prop that up in the 60s and 70s. They made these packages. NFL Films is the propaganda arm of the NFL, and it's amazing. Like I love it. I used to actually beg my parents to stay up in the 70s during Monday Night Football. I
Oh
wanted
yeah.
to see the package that Cosell would put together that just kind of recapped. This is before ESPN and everything else,
Yeah.
and that was the highlight of my week because I had watched the games on Sunday, so it's not like it was new information, but I still wanted to see it packaged with that voice and those images, and that's really what I'm trying to get at with this game.
Awesome, awesome. Love it. So if you would quickly recap, I know what your latest plan is for Canton, August 24th, 25th, but how are you running your 2 days there at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, folks? Come on.
Yeah. So the Saturday is going to be exclusively free play and demos. You can come out to our. I think you're setting up 3 tables for us, which we would love to have. We're going to have a station for solo. We're going to have a station where you can have the game demoed, and we're going to have a couple of tables where we're going to set up head-to-head games. And we'll have, like I said, all 42 franchises available, so you can kind of pick and choose who you want to play. And don't feel pressured to play a whole game. If you just want to dip a toe in the water and kind of try out a drive or two and see if it's for you, we're very comfortable to do that. So it doesn't have to be a large time commitment if you don't want it to be. But I think if you start playing it and you start feeling good about it, then you're going to want to have that whole game experience, and you can do that on Saturday. What we're hoping is that enough people kind of see the value and want to participate that they'll sign up on Saturday for our Sunday tournament. And that Sunday tournament will run basically 3 rounds. We're expecting to have 8 spots available. If we have more interest, we'll figure out a way to accommodate more players. But right now, we're just sort of hoping for 8 players who are new to the game, who can all kind of play on a level playing field and choose the teams that they enjoy. And we'll play a 3 round round robin tournament and get a winner.
Nice, nice. Love it, love it. Arthur, thank you so much, sir. It's been a real pleasure. I can't wait to see you in a couple of months in the flesh. Where can people buy the game right now?
So Breakaway Football is available on the Game Crafter website. All of our expansions and the core game are there. You can also buy, if you're a print and play person, you can go out to Gumroads, just type in Uplink Underground Gumroad, and it'll come up right up first thing in Google. And all of our products are listed as PNP as well. And so you're not losing any quality with the PNP. If you, especially if you're really good at kind of arts and crafts, it's about a tenth of the cost if you go to the PNP. So it's very affordable on the PNP. And of course, you can always go to Tabletop Simulator. We have a workshop that's for free on Steam, so you can download or actually subscribe to the workshop on Steam once you have a copy of Tabletop Simulator, and you can grab the core box for free. You can actually play it, see if it's something you're interested in. You can play it with people across the globe, and then we have the expansion teams, the other 38 expansion teams, available as saved games that you can purchase from Gumroad and import into your Tabletop Simulator. You can have everything right there and not have to build it. So there's lots of different ways to get it.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you and your team for an incredible entry into this wonderful hobby. Folks, check this out. I think you're going to be amazed. If this description didn't do it for you, go and check them out on Facebook, join their group, and really get into the guts of one of the most innovative games, I think, in the history of football gaming.
Jeff, thank you for your time and for including us. It's a tremendous honor to be part of this event, and we're just hoping to live up to the past of what it's provided. So thank you again for having us.
Thank you.